Hello and welcome. This is Rooflemonger, and my friend Sin is now live for Guilty Gear Strive, and he's a very interesting boy with good range, lots of just follow-ups and pressure, all that kind of fun stuff. But today we're here to talk about one thing. We're here to talk specifically about the food mechanic, where he can just chow down on stuff and get random buffs. Now, in the lead up to his launch, they were quite coy about what all these buffs do. And I figured, okay, well, come launch, we'll just go to the command list and, figure out what it is, right? But the thing is, they don't tell you what the buffs are, even in the command list. Sin takes out food and eats it. Something good happens after he eats. That's not exactly very clear now, is it, right? So thankfully, I banged my head against the game for a while to figure out what all these buffs do, and we're going to go through all of them for your benefit. So first up here, there is 5 kinds of buffs. We have the ice cream buff, the lizard buff, the meat buff, the fish buff, and the lobster buff. So those are 5 different things, and every time you see that item, the effect is the same to a degree. Because while each item does the same effect, the amount of the effect you get is random. As best as I can tell, every food buff has different levels, and the amount of buff you get can be a little bit or a lot. So that said, now let's just go through all the food items. So first, let's talk the lizard buff. The lizard buff is pretty straightforward as it grants you health. As you see right there, we got some health back. But the thing is, since all the items, despite doing the same fixed thing, lizard will always give you health, the amount of health it gives is random. So right there, we got health again, but you notice it wasn't as much as the first time we got health, right? So it can be just a tiny little sliver or a respectable chunk. It's basically up to the winds of fate. So lizard equals health. Now our next one is ice cream. Ice cream builds your tension meter, your super meter. And once again, just like health, just like all these, it is random. Sometimes you get a little bit, sometimes you get a lot. See right there? That was a pretty significant gain of tension, right? Compared to the first one especially. So you got to roll the dice basically and hope you get the jackpot. So ice cream is your super meter. Now the big meat. That one, there's no obvious change in any of your meters. What it actually gives you is a damage boost. So let's take something like Stand Slash. Stand Slash does exactly 33 damage against Soul. And now, say we get the meat buff. Okay, we got the meat buff, and now 34 damage. But once again, it's random. This time it's 35. On the lower end of the buff, you need a much stronger attack to even see the damage gain. So for this, Stand Slash just doesn't do enough damage to even get 1 bonus point of damage on the low end of the buff. So it's not much damage and it only lasts for a few seconds. So say the amount of time I just spent talking and now try to hit him again, it's already gone back. It's done, right? So only lasts a few seconds and the damage buff isn't that big, but it is a couple more points of damage potentially during a combo. Now the lobster buff. Another one that's not immediately apparent is basically the opposite of the meat buff. So the lobster buff means you take less damage. So for the purpose of science here, we'll have Soul beat our head in, and you can see the amount of damage I am. And basically, the life bar is exactly where his name ends, right? Now we eat another lobster, and he kicks our head in, and well, the life bar is a little further ahead than it was before. And like all of these, the buff varies every time you get it. This time around, not as much, right? Still, we took less damage than it would be raw, but it's only just a tiny little defense buff. So the lobster, you have a temporary damage buff. You take a little bit less damage for a few seconds. And finally, the fish buff. The fish buff, I'm not going to lie to you, I beat my head against the wall for a while to figure out what it is, because it's very, very subtle. And what the fish buff is it buffs your move speed. You're running, you're walking, and sometimes it's not very noticeable. Like all the buffs are random. Sometimes it's a decent amount, sometimes it's just a little bit. And if you happen to get the fish buff when it's only the small buff, your walk speed difference, your run speed difference, it's imperceptible. You just cannot tell. So what I'm going to show you here is just the run to soul with the regular speed and with a decent sized fish buff, and compare the two. So not worlds of difference to be sure, but you indeed have a small speed boost with the fish buff, and it's a bit more noticeable if you happen to randomly, because you don't get to choose, get the higher end of the buff. And there you have it. So is this going to be a giant part of his game plan? Not really, probably not. You know what? Maybe it'll become the biggest deal. I don't know, right? It's certainly very interesting. At the very least, one thing I could see is fish combos specifically. If you happen to get to, and I'm trying, we're just doing random select till I get a fish to finish my sentence here. And we're just going to keep doing, I'm not editing this out. We're going to keep going till I get a fish to make my point. There we go, we got a fish. So maybe if you get a max level fish and get the speed boost from the fish, right? There might be max level fish combos that are only possible with the speed boost from the fish. Who knows, right? But as it stands, it's a little side gimmick, but it's a fun one. Eating the food was always, an integral part of his character in Guilty Gear Xrd, so I'm happy, even though maybe there's not so much the food meter anymore, they did bring it forward to the future for the character. So that all said, my friends, that is how the mechanic works. There's a lot to be discovered with Sin just yet, so it's time to hit the lab and just start grinding it out. So until next time, hey, thank you very much for watching. Hope this video has found you well, and go out and play some Guilty Gear.